Hi, I'm Dave from softshuffle.co.uk, and Soft Shuffle is the system I created to let you fully randomize any size deck of cards just by dealing them out. Now, one of the other frequently asked questions I get is, can I not just get this by doing pile shuffling and using a random number generator? And by random number generator, I mean like a dice or your phone giving you a stream of random numbers. And the answer is kind of. You can start looking at ways of doing it with that, and it kind of works. But if you want to get to the point of full randomness, so whatever order your cards start in, each possible order is equally likely, you end up looping around and just ending up back at how soft shuffle works anyway. So I'll try and explain that. And if you want a full explanation of how soft shuffle works and some of the stuff that I refer to, you realistically need to look at the big technical video or technical page. I'm going to make some assertions that I show or prove in that video. I'm just going to make them in this video. So let us start with what happens if I have 100 cards, 10 piles, and a dice or a phone that keeps generating me numbers from 1 to 10. To make sure that I can have every possible order and they're equally likely, I need to do 2 deals, and the way the cards end up has to be quite specific for those 2 deals. Now, for the first deal, I need every card to be equally likely to end up in each pile. Now that's fine with a dice or random number generator. You just roll it and deal each card based on what you've rolled. The problem is you also need it to be true that there are exactly 10 cards in each pile, and that's the bit that's where you start to fall down with just using a random number generator, in that unless you're incredibly lucky, you're always going to end up with different numbers of cards in different piles. And as soon as you start having to redistribute those to make them equal, you're going to introduce bias, which defeats the point of it. Okay, so how do you get around that? Well, you get around that by generating a new order for the cards and dealing to that order, or what you do in soft shuffle. Okay, so what about the second deal? Maybe we can just do that with a random number generator, and you kind of end up with a similar problem. So you're doing something slightly different. So in the second deal, the top 10 cards, you need to have exactly 1 on each pile. And again, if you're just rolling random numbers, that's not going to happen. You're going to end up with one pile having 2 cards before you have a card another, and that breaks it. Again, you've introduced bias, and again you come to the same conclusion that you could do it, but you'd have to do it by generating a new order for those 10 cards and dealing to that order. So in both cases, you've ended up saying, well, I could sort of do it, but to actually make it work, I have to introduce bias by messing around with where the cards end up. And to not have bias, I have to deal to an order. And you're like, well, okay, that's soft shuffle. And that's just looking at the case where you have exactly the number of cards that is the square of the number of piles. When you are talking about a number of cards that's less than the square, it will work. But to make it work, you have to have them end up in piles. Similarly, in the first pass, you end up with the cards needing to be in the piles such that you kind of have them with the same number in each, but with some with not quite as many. And then it gets even more tricky in the second pass. You need to use less than all of the piles, and that's quite interesting in itself. It's very interesting how that all works. And yeah, if that sounds quite interesting, go and look at the technical video. But again, you end up so restricted that you're just like, well, I just have to do soft shuffle anyway. So yeah, the answer is you kind of can, but if you want it to actually work and give you all the benefits, then you more or less just end up back at Soft Shuffle anyway. So yeah, if you would like to learn any more, please go to softshuffle.co.uk.